The example of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shows us the courage needed to put one's complete trust in God. Of course, other men in the examples that we've already noticed have trusted in God, but the example of Daniel's young friends is different, and they did not receive special direct revelation, at least as far as we know from what the Scriptures tell us, like many of the other Old Testament characters received. Therefore, their example is very helpful for us today. Notice Daniel chapter 3, beginning in verse 15. Now, if you are ready at the moment you hear the sound of the horn, flute, lyre, trigon, psaltery, and bagpipe, and all kinds of music, to fall down and worship the image that I've made, very well. But if you do not worship, you will immediately be cast into the midst of a furnace of blazing fire, and what God is there who can deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to give you an answer concerning this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire, and he will deliver us out of your hand, O king. But even if he does not, let it be known to you, O king, that we are not going to serve your gods or worship the golden image that you have set up. Friends, we are called to trust God and be faithful to Him, even though our future in this life is uncertain. And while we understand that God has the power to do many great things, we must not think that He has some obligation to arrange events to turn out in the way that we desire. Because of this, we must have the courage to trust in God, even though He may allow us to suffer. This was the type of courage that was displayed by Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Friends, this took place during the time of the Babylonian captivity. When King Nebuchadnezzar came to Jerusalem, he took certain young men to be trained to serve in his courts, and among these youths were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The last three are better known by the names that they had assigned to them in Babylon, that of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And it's important to know why this happened. The text says the Lord gave them into his hand, Daniel 1 and verse 2. This was done because of the sins of the nation. So this was not an accident, a coincidence, or bad luck that this happened. This was something that had been orchestrated by God. Now these three were blessed by God, but they lacked the ability to understand all kinds of visions and dreams like Daniel was able to do. But they entered into the king's personal service. And while serving the king, trouble came. The king made a golden statue and ordered everyone to worship at this statue at certain prescribed times. The penalty for not worshiping the image was to be cast into a fiery furnace. And when it was reported to Nebuchadnezzar that these three did not worship the image, he called them before him to give an account of what they had done. He even gave them a second chance to do what he wanted them to do, but they refused to comply, citing their complete trust in God. After this, Nebuchadnezzar heated the furnace 7 times more than usual, and he threw in these three young men. The furnace was so hot that even the guards who cast them in were killed. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego survived. When the king ordered them to come out, he found no injury, no damage, no smell of fire on these men whatsoever. Nebuchadnezzar responded by praising God for delivering these men and praising them for trusting in God. Friends, the Scriptures show us at least 3 reasons why the actions of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego took courage. First, they were among the few who did not worship this image. This made them a target as they were singled out and called before an angry king. Most people today prefer not to stir up trouble for themselves if they can help it. Second, they had a second chance. When these three came before Nebuchadnezzar, the king gave them one more chance to comply with his order regarding the golden image. Now, this is common with persecution. Rulers will often rather spare one who is willing to denounce God than to kill one who serves God. Sadly, when a second chance to sin, compromise, or deny the Lord is given, many are willing to take it. And thirdly, they didn't know what was going to happen. They knew that God had the power to save them, but they didn't know if He would. But again, remember, they were not prophets like Daniel. They had no way to know what lay in store for them, but they put their trust in God. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were faced with the threat of death. They knew that God had the power to deliver them, but they didn't know if He would choose to do so or not. And despite this uncertainty, they placed their trust in God, and they were delivered. Friends, in the same way, we may be faced with threats and attacks today, and we know that God has the power to deliver us and prevent us from suffering harm. But we do not know what will happen in our future. Rather than basing our faith upon God causing circumstances to unfold a certain way in our lives, we must base our faith upon His Word, and in the end, He will deliver us. Sure, we may have to face imprisonment, violence, even death, but if we are faithful, He will still reward us with the crown of life. Friends, we thank you for joining us today, and have a blessed day.